You're listening to The Craft, a podcast for professional content creators who want to learn more about the people, process, and strategy behind the best content on the web. In each episode, we talk with writers, designers, and editors from the world's leading content teams and learn the secrets to their success. Let's jump in and get you inspired for your next story.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Craft Podcast, brought to you by Shorthand. I'm Rachel Westbury, a senior editor here at Shorthand. And today, my very special guest is Nahum Hendricks. He's the creative director and production manager at 7 West Mint. And that's a content studio for 7 West Media in WA. So in this role, Nahum leads the charge on some seriously breathtaking branded content for the likes of the West Australian and Perth Now. So today, I'll be asking Nahum all about his career successes, his failures and rookie moves, and all the learnings he's had along the way. Nahum, thank you so much for joining me today.
Good morning, Rachel. Or morning from where we are, but glad that you could have me.
Awesome. So to kick off, can you tell me about your career background and how you got to where you are today?
That's a good question. So there's a short version and a longer version. I'll just race with the short version first. Basically, I've been employed in so many forms of content creation since 2006. And even before that, I would, download the illegal Adobe programs or bits and pieces in high school, make little videos on your camcorder and all that kind of stuff. But, took all the photography and writing classes. But really, since 2006, I've been employed, in areas of social media, online video broadcast, even web development, design, editorial. I've worked in creative agency, government, arts, media and culture, news, and even like health behavior change, which is quite a big passion of mine. So how I got here is basically swinging between branches, grabbing onto the next thing in front of me and learning. Now that's the resume version of it, but I guess the slightly longer version is it's just around passion and interest. And like I said, it goes way back to when I was a kid. I would, collect texters and make connected pens into guns or toys, I should say. Wasn't really big on guns. Coloring books, creating videos, graphic design, collages and all that kind of stuff. And I guess I'm just really lucky to grow up in a background that kind of was a bit different. My parents were migrants here. We had to sort of make life work for us. There's a lot of cultural things which have sort of shaped me. And for me, creativity is not just what I put down on paper or, a plan or an end product, but it's kind of stems out of, the range of experiences or things that we embody. And I love the fact that I can be an advocate for a lot of things as well and use creativity, in a professional environment to do that. So, yeah. So I'm passionate about content, stories, brands, and really bringing them to life and really about the human experience around them. Big passion of mine.
So for listeners who aren't familiar with the work that your team do at 7 West Mint, can you tell us about what types of content you and the team create?
Yeah. So 7 West Mint, as you've mentioned, we're the commercial content studio for 7 West Media WA. So we specialize in content, and I like to say, create content for every screen. And there's I work within the advertising team, the sales reps, and they talk to the clients around what we can produce for them. Now, the bulk of what we do, and this is kind of where we started, is branded content or native content. And that essentially sits alongside our editorial content, as you mentioned, on the West and Perth Now. And we also have some involvement with the 7 Network. So branded content, if you're unaware, is the ability for advertisers to access and leverage the insight, the skill set, the brand of a masthead or a content creator, and the specific purpose of engaging with, that brand or that masthead's audience. And in some ways, like we think of it as a younger cousin to the traditional advertorial infomercial. But I guess one important point of difference for me, kind of working almost exclusively in the digital space, is we come in with an audience first value in that. And then this is because, listen, I'm a consumer. I know as consumers, we know what we like to consume. It's an active audience in digital on social. And the reality is, when you look at the numbers in digital, you can get very specific around the audience and what they're engaging with, as opposed to a generic circulation figure. So that's why we put a lot of emphasis on in Mint on audience-led content experiences. And it fits naturally with branded, and it fits naturally with branded content on what we do. So we'd write articles, do immersives or e-zines, which is what we do with shorthand, a lot of social content like social video content or carousels or images or graphics amongst a lot of other things.
I'd love to hear your thoughts, Nahum. Then, given your background, the background of your career journey, that is, and how it all stemmed from creativity and a love for creating, do you think there's a real opportunity there in terms of creatives and channeling that energy into, I suppose, branded content? And I guess it's like advertising, but not quite.
Mm, yeah, it's interesting. I've got a really great team, and one of the things I've been really proud about, you know, is the fact that we've had some low turnover in staff, which tells me that the team really enjoy, part of it is they enjoy what they do. And conversations that I've had with the team, and even what I know about myself, is we really enjoy the space that we're in because we've got the, you might say the best of both worlds, but on the flip side, you can look at the worst of both worlds. But on the positives, the best of both worlds in that we're leveraging editorial success. We are modeling what we do of what we're seeing journalists or writers or content creators produce, which, as I've mentioned, is very audience centric. And it's, the content we produce is for generally an active audience. The great thing is because we're working with advertisers and, our content is costed up appropriately and structured appropriately, we have structure on our side, budget on our side, appropriate budget, and we've got timelines on our side. It's not like an editor has come to us or a senior has come to us that we need this story out really quickly and it needs to do X, Y, and Z. We, in many ways, are the master of our own destiny. And of course, that's come with growth and challenges, which have all sort of been a bit of a success, which is where we found the successes in them, of course. But it's definitely an exciting area. Often we get people coming to us who want to be involved in digital content, and they can come and get something from us. It's a bit lower budget because we're not depending or relying on production or high production values of a TV campaign or anything like that to tell the story. We can sort of get straight to the heart of it and go, what does the audience online want to do? And tell us a bit more about your brand. So
Amazing, Nahum. So, as promised, we're going to dive into some of your defining career successes, whether that be a standout piece of content, a winning strategy, or anything in between. So, thinking about the span of your career so far, what successes stand out to you and why?
for me, I find my creative journey has been very left and right brain or arts and science coming together, which is super fascinating. Recently, I guess the first thing I want to talk about kind of culminated in a new role I was able to secure and hire for last year, creative operations manager. That whole area is a big passion of mine. And really creative ops it's more than a project manager. It's more than just operations, but it's someone or it's a role or it's a frame of thinking that understands the technical detail, that understands complexity, workflows and all that kind of stuff, but that it is embedded within creativity. It's not like an external consultant coming in and basically telling creatives to stop being creative. So I really love that kind of stuff. And for me, it kind of been a bit of a learned behavior change. When I was younger, I had lots of ideas, opinions, and things that I wanted to do, but it was just really hard to actually get things done for lots of different reasons. So what I found is, working in sort of behavior change and bits and pieces, I was able to kind of look at structure and how to use that to, I guess, harness your creativity, to focus your creativity, how to template things in an appropriate way, not just a standard template that kind of does all the thinking for you, in some ways automates it. So you are free to sort of play and dabble in the creative space. So, I've kind of embedded that in the team since day one, which has been so valuable to sort of creating our products, creating our end products, creating consistency across the team, opening up accountability. And I guess for me, the crowning jewel was sort of coming in last year to say, listen, I needed head of the team. And instead of saying I need another writer or video producer, which would have been super valuable, what I said is I need a creative operations manager. And everyone said, what's that? So I went through and sort of explained them, and that role has been terrific in sort of being able to project manage something like what we call an immersive that we do with shorthand, because as you know, it's not just write content, put it online. It's, write content, backlinks, optimizing images, various screens, various stakeholders, checking links. If there's no little random space on the end of a link that is a dead link, and all of that kind of stuff. Integrated, for us, making sure it sits on our tech stack, integrates into our tech stack. So it's all those bits and pieces. And also that role just looks at a lot of the operational stuff in our team. We do a lot of video content as well. So, ensuring like casual employees and contractors are looked after and all the paperwork's being run through and things like that, but not just looking at it and ticking things off, but kind of going systematically, how do we improve this function? Because it's not going to go away. It's going to get more complex, but how do we make the process more enjoyable and simple? Therefore, leaving the creatives, giving them more headspace to focus on the creative job at hand. The second career success for me is probably the other side of the brain. And that's being able to like relish in narrative. And if somebody comes, with a brief, they might already, feel like they know what they want. Can you do us this? Give us a good idea. But having the space to step back, to think about the idea, to think about the other ideas that they've already asked for, pooling resources, doing research, thinking about that idea as more than just the result, but as a narrative. So what we do is we create brand narratives or brand boards, which is somewhere between a mood board and a style guide. I think there's probably different people have come up with this thing before, but we've created brand boards and they're very, very helpful for specifically our shorthand projects. So we've got a writer who would do a concept and they would go and write the narrative, the however many words it is, however many pages it is. And then or the person directing it would kind of sit there and go, what is the overall narrative of this piece? So we've got the words here, and then we get our designer or art director or whoever to kind of sit with us, and then we nut it out and then visually present that idea. And then attached to that, we're like heading 1, heading 2, all your different style guides, all your selection of fonts, your selection of colors, so that when we send that brand board off to the client, not only do they see the concept, they visually experience it. Once that's approved, our creative ops manager puts that straight into shorthand and we build a theme around it so everything is locked off. So, and then from the back of that, if there's any other campaign material attached to that particular concept, whether they're creating in PowerPoint, even Photoshop, videos, so Premiere Pro and After Effects, we've got this like library of content that we use. So everything kind of aligns. We're not having to rebrief everything every time. I'm not having to say to every person working on it, this is the look and feel. It's all kind of sitting there in a doc. And not only can they see it, it's not just a flat doc, it's a branded experience. So they can, intuitively feel it. Oh, those kinds of images are used. Oh, that's what is done with that line feature, that little graphic feature. That's the style of iconography we're using. And it's actually just kind of two things. It's brought creativity together, but it's also streamlined the execution process, which has been really fascinating.
Wow, that sounds like a bit of a masterstroke in terms of ensuring, that high level of not only consistency, but quality as well across every piece of content that your team are creating for a brand, whether they come back to you in 6 months' time and need a little something else, it's all there. And can I ask, Nahum, do you think that you might be happy to share an example of one of these packages that we could link in the show notes for our audience?
Yeah. I will have a look at that and see if we can find something appropriate that we've done, either for shorthand or some other examples of that. But I'd be more than happy to find something. Yeah.
It sounds honestly like, now that I've heard that that's a thing that exists,
Yeah.
I could really imagine going, starting off a project, especially with, a brand with a really distinct tone of voice and style. And like you say, the feeling and emotions that they're looking to evoke in what they're creating,
Yeah.
to have that all in one space.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean, there's another challenge, and I feel like this is every, creative director's challenge, is you've got a responsibility to direct the creative of, like a big group of assets of a team of every output in many ways. But equally, as a creative, you totally understand that everybody brings something to the table. That we put it this way, we hate being micromanaged. So, the challenge is, how do we manage a team without micromanaging the team? And also, like, where do you find the time to manage them? So this is and this is part of an ongoing question, ongoing grapple that all creative directors have to do. But for me, this was a solution that worked. You set the tone, the big tone of creative, And then people are a bit more empowered to know what they need to do. And also they've got a reference point to come back and ask questions on. So
On that note of micromanaging teams, or trying not to, and keeping your creatives, I suppose, keeping your creatives feeling inspired and productive and engaged in the work that they're doing, but on budget and on time. Can I
yeah.
ask whether you faced any challenges in bringing on your creative ops manager and how you might have overcome those while we're on the topic?
Yeah, it was a bit of a process. So fortunately, there was a need to open up another role within the team. We were, hitting budget. We were stretched for time. So the question was what that role was, and also there was an observation, obviously a personal observation, but my leaders as well, that I was being really stretched in that I was sort of doing too much, and it was really difficult to kind of isolate what they were, and then just blue room thinking's like, how do we get a name? Is there a name 2.0? That was question number one. And I thought potentially, but what we do is quite unique. And I kind of thought there'd be more value in looking in another direction where we could have someone who's not just a name 2.0, but someone that specializes in a sort of a more particular area, but who's also really broad in their skill set as well. The other thing, as I mentioned, is why not just get another writer or a producer or someone who can edit. And I guess for me, as much as I, sort of love more of that, more diversity in the team, more opportunity, more resources, it's more challenging to outsource operational tasks and work because it requires somebody to be quite broad and understand the business and understand clients and understand the culture and ethos. Whereas sometimes like a writer or an editor, it's easier to outsource those parts of the projects. It's just a lot cleaner and more efficient. So that was always a bit of the thinking behind that, but it was a bit of a journey. I sort of had to put together a business plan to sort of explain how it works, how it unlock more revenue, all that kind of stuff. But it's actually been a really great decision. And not only has that role benefited my studio, my team, but other teams have been able to tap into the skill set that was brought in with that hire as well. So, and again, it just sort of helps us connect around the business with like other projects and bits and pieces. So yeah.
Amazing. It's been really valuable to hear about some of the successes that you've had. So thank you so much, Nahum, for sharing those. I thought we could pivot now to talk about some failures, some mistakes, and how you've learned and grown from them. I know it's really tricky to talk about failures. No one loves that, but it's always so
No.
valuable. So let's talk failure. Nahum, thinking again over the span of your career so far, what are some examples of failures that you've had, and what have you learned from these?
You're right. Failures are a tricky one to talk about because there are so many of them. It's almost like you've got this list of TV shows that you need to catch up and watch, right? And you know there are heaps of them, but unless you write them down, well, when it comes to like, oh, what am I going to watch tonight? I've got so many, and you just can't recall any of them. So I'll answer that two ways. There's like a very sort of specific example. It's certainly not the worst or the only example of a failure, but it definitely was a really could have been a big one, but a bit of a failure with a strong learning curve. And that was like early on in my career. I was working in an agency, and it was my first time in agency. And we had a client, and I didn't actually understand or didn't fully understand because the client was so lovely. I didn't understand the boundaries then. So I replied all in an email, which should have been internal only, something not inappropriate at all, just something more along the lines of, shouldn't we all get together and figure this out? Something like that. Of which my boss then replied one-on-one to me and just said, completely inappropriate. And effectively it was like, you've got to understand the boundaries between agency and client. There are some things where you need to nut it out together and then send a united front, which is so elementary for me now, so basic. But it was just that little moment that you needed to kind of go, that's right. As creators, we like to, sometimes we don't, but we like to be collaborative and share in bits and pieces and try to get everyone involved. But it's not always the most efficient or professional way of doing things. So just understanding kind of a bit of the plan. Whenever somebody joins my team, I give them a bit of a comprehensive, not a comprehensive, but even just a breakdown of the complexity of our business, of our company. Just so you know, like, this is our team. This is kind of the things that we do. This is a team we work with a lot. These are the things they do. Because the organization is quite complex, here's a little hierarchy of sort of where the CEO sits and all that kind of stuff. And it really, I guess it really helped when I started because, we're doing content for Seven West Media. Like, why can't we just get Home and Away's Alf on something? Because we work for the same company, right? It just helped kind of explain the complexity in a real simple way. Other kind of, I wouldn't really call these failures. These are just more learnings. I guess with creative teams, like, I'd like to consider myself relatively easygoing staff. I've got my own, challenges, shortcomings, my own past and background. So I understand, you know, nobody's perfect or anything like that. But there have been a couple of moments, really enlightening moments with the team where someone has just said something or someone's called me up on something. Even the way I'm just communicating with them, although, sort of being above the line or just kind of mentioning something personal that's happening in their life. And they're kind of lights on moments where, like, I've had to sort of step back and then go back to them and just ask a bit more about them. But what it helped me do is to learn a bit more about them. Whether it's like it's issues that are outside of things that I know. Like, I mean, some of the stuff I know, like, come from diverse LGBTI background and things like that. But then also, like, challenges of working moms. We've had some people go for maternity leave, and we've had some really great examples of how they've been able to come back to work. But the same way, upholding with all of this, upholding the things that we need to do in the business, the efficiencies and all that kind of stuff. So those have been sort of career challenges, but really, I guess, a really exciting one at that. So, and further to that, working all that magic within our team and being able to be an example within the broader business, which for advertising can be quite a traditional industry. So I'm very privileged to say we've got a very open, honest team, like a great working culture where people are as honest as they feel they can be, but it's really helped the tone and create space and comfort and making things comfortable for a lot of people.
It's really interesting, Nahum, hearing you talk about these perceived failures across your career, because I think ultimately these have made you a better communicator and a better leader, and by the sounds of things, a better human too.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's it. The last one there's kind of the ultimate goal, really.
Isn't it just?
Just do better. Just be a better human.
And
Thank you.
And hey, I figure, what high pressure media or creative outlet agency couldn't use a little bit more humanity in the ranks, like, it's so important. And I feel like it's only through having those little stumbles in your career in communicating with others and learning others' working style that you really get a feel for, like, actually, this is how I want it to be. And maybe there's room at work for some sense of, I guess, fallibility or humanness.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great platform to start having those conversations. Maybe the question hasn't been asked yet. Also to show support for your team to say, this is new to me, this is new to us, but let's go on the journey together. Let's create a safe space for you.
Well, Nahum, thank you so much for being willing to have a chat about your mistakes and challenges and learnings that you've had across your career, at least so far. This next question now moves more towards advice, reflection, and I think it's a nice sort of transition into thinking about all the ways that we learn from, failing.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your younger self?
I would say, like, first, just continue to be open to new things. Like, especially when you're young, like, you're going to be okay. If you make mistakes, that's fine. But I guess the other bit of advice is, and it's sort of advice that a manager gave to me earlier on in my career, is don't be afraid to lead upward, especially if you know you've got leadership potential, which I think so many people, if not everyone, does. And it is hard because it requires kind of understanding how to read the room, which is a skill set in of itself. So respect to people that can do it well. But what I've learned is, like, going back, to when I was first given that advice, it kind of started to change things. I started to think about, what does leading upwards look like? Even if it's just creating not a false perception, but giving your manager confidence that you're onto something or you're thinking about something a little bit outside of what you're doing. But now, like as a manager, as a creative director, it's so valuable when someone comes to you. Obviously, like, they need to raise the issues with you, but it's so valuable when they come to you, but they've got options and solutions. Like, then I feel like I'm being led, and it's like they're respecting me by sharing this information so I can help them with any insights. And then, the options may not be right, but at least we've got somewhere to start. But also, they're helping me to sort of lead the team or lead the project. Then it's not a case of, here's the problem, I'll leave it with you. So advice to younger self is, I guess it was advice that I already received, but I'll just reaffirm the fact that don't be afraid to lead upward and work out what that looks like for you. Not everyone's leadership styles are the same, but it certainly helps. And I feel like your seniors and your managers and also leading sideways, your peers around you really appreciate that as well.
To follow on from that excellent tidbit of advice, Nahum, around leading upwards, for those sort of mid-career creators who are listening to this episode, do you have one, I suppose, like practical example of how you led upwards with confidence, even if internally you're a bit like, oh, here we go, but I'm going to give it a crack?
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit there?
Yeah. At first, it's really good to, like I said, read the room or understand your supervisors as best you can, like how they like to receive information. So it's just really good that just aids your delivery. But I would say the best thing for me is whether it's responding to a situation or a problem or it's being proactive, give options, more than one. So essentially, we've hit this kind of snag, or you can even own it. I've hit this particular problem, which I didn't foresee coming. I've had to think of kind of the options. There's option A, which looks like this. There might be a challenge here, or option B, which looks like this. And like I said, then you're giving your supervisor, you're giving the people around you something to work with. And they might go, oh, well, option A is so much safer for us. And they'll it's more than likely they'll appreciate you kind of owning up to the error, even if it's not your error. And like I said, there might be an option C, but at least your manager, your supervisor, and you can workshop that together. And you've already started a dialogue.
Nahum, what's been the most interesting or fascinating change that you've seen in the industry?
For me, I'm not sure how pronounced or where it's sitting. I feel like we're still kind of at the cusp of it in Australia, but this conceptualization of design operations or creative operations, I feel like it's something that's been in tech for longer, but those who are working more with content in the sort of creative industry, I think is just starting to roll it now. I mean, we've been given so many online tools, like web-based tools, which promise to make your life easier, and they do. But how many of those tools do we actually optimize and use to their full potential? You know, and I think in this case, while the technology is great and is there, and there's so much we can do to make our lives more efficient, it's sometimes the engineer or the creative ops person behind that, the person who is a bit passionate about that. So this concept of creative ops, I think, is really an exciting sort of venture for the industry, which industry could be any, to be honest, in that, we're appreciating structure and the importance of it, but doing it in an intuitive way that doesn't stamp out creativity or doesn't, make you seek to create uniformity per se, but it seeks to create consistency, but maximizing creative potential.
Yeah, it's a real balance, hey, because it's like right brain, left brain thinking, as we spoke about earlier. You don't want your creatives
Right.
to feel so boxed in terms of the
Mm.
scope of their work, but also
Yeah.
you don't want your creative ops manager feeling like, how am I going to get this piece of content delivered,
Yeah.
without blowing out the budget? So
Yeah.
I could see there being a really harmonious relationship there between,
Mhm.
the team and the ops manager. For you personally, Nahum, what's that working relationship been like for you as creative director and production manager
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
between you and your creative ops manager?
Yeah. I've been fortunate because creative ops is like sort of one side of me as well. So I'm very empathetic and completely sort of get it. And I'm quite passionate about it as well. But at the same rate, I've kind of had to hand over the reins in certain points. And But, we sit side by side. We work pretty closely together. That role is continually evolving, as there are more kind of sort of requirements and bits and pieces from around the business for particular things, especially if you're going offsite on a shoot and all that kind of stuff. But we're very fortunate in that it's pretty harmonious. And again, a lot of that comes down to culture and sort of who you hire as well. I didn't want like an accountant, project manager type, which they could be very creative. I don't mean to stereotype or anything like that. But, we were fortunate to get someone who really understands or loves the creative world as well. And also just understanding that role exists to support the creatives, not the other, not, I mean, listen, they exist to support each other, but it's not this role's in charge telling you how to do your job. So it's very much about listening and learning as well. And even me with my teams, whilst I'm being a creative ops, I want to make sure that I'm hearing that, the challenges. If a process isn't working, I'd like to know why, not just because it doesn't work. Options again. So I guess it ultimately does depend on like relationship and communication and making sure that work culture is really good and just setting the standard, setting the boundary. This is a creative team. We're going to do things really efficiently and well, and we're going to pursue that excellence, but at our heart, we're a creative team. So let's have an Instagram group and share all the kinds of memes that we find and things like that. So make sure that's a big part of what we do.
That's awesome. And for teams who might be listening and wondering about, the scale of your team in terms of being able to bring in that creative ops manager, could you give our listeners some background on how big your team currently is and
Yeah.
how that all works too?
We are currently 9 permanent staffers, and we have like quite a long list of casual staffers and contractors and bits and pieces. So who also, feed into the team at different points. And I guess, yeah, the we needed an extra body in the team. There was a specific need around all the things that I was doing because I was doing what I established as creative ops plus sort of my role at the same time. So yeah, so we're a team of about 9 permanent staffers.
What advice would you give those working in, management or
Mm,
leadership?
mm.
What advice would you give leaders and managers who are looking to hire potentially their first creative operations manager?
I would say the good thing is if you're hiring a creative ops manager, you're possibly not filling a role. So you've got a bit of time to really think about, do your research on what the role is and what you want out of it, and then to find the right person. In my case, actually, the person that I ended up hiring about a year prior to applied for a different role. And whilst I was kind of interviewing that person, they really stood out to me. So I kept their resume in my top drawer. And I had no real concept of the fact that we're going to have a creative ops manager a year later. But as I was working through that, figured out, oh, hang on, I think there's someone we've already got a communication with. As we were working out the nuts and bolts of that, I quite respectfully, candidly, was able to kind of share a little bit of what I was looking at. So we're able to tease that out a bit early. But I guess that happened over a period of time. But I would say I guess, take your time to find the right person. And a big thing that I kind of say, for creatives is make sure you're catching up with people, talent in the industry well before you're looking for jobs or talent for a video shoot. Make sure you're putting that time in so you get to know people. And, it might go in months, days, months, years even before contact happens. But once it's there, you already know that person. You already know what they're interested in. And, the other thing is you then can recommend them to other places as well. So if you're not looking, just maybe have it on your radar and start catching up with people. And, I've got we'll call it a little black book of just names of people that I've met that, with particular skill sets. And again, like I don't believe in, taking down the garden path and promising them anything. No, just keep it really casual and above the line, but, just appreciate there's great people out there to start talking to.
For some of our listeners, all this chat of creative operations could potentially be pretty new to them. It's
Mm.
in some fields quite an emerging area. What's an example of a campaign or content piece that came together with the help of your creative operations manager? that stands out to you as just it was seamless and the result showed all of those things falling into place?
Yeah, I would say our standard immersive or sort of easy type piece that we've done. I used to be really, really involved in every single detail of them. Listen, I enjoyed the detail. Like I totally understood what was under the bonnet and that kind of thing. But they really did. They were really, really time consuming on my part. So there were other things in the team that I couldn't do. So those projects run like watertight now. Like they just tick along, move along. We've optimized it so creatives are working on brand boards as well. So it's not completely transactional. And the creative ops manager actually works quite closely with our designer because there's just a natural synergy there as well as a newer part of our team. But then it's sometimes the bigger projects where we've had to create like a brand board, and then we've had like various pieces of content. Like there might be 2 social videos, a couple of social graphics, an e-zine immersive, which then has to kind of sort of be worked out, and we have to make sure we hit all the deliverables and all that kind of stuff. So in that regard, the creative ops manager has sort of come together, looked at all the variables, looked at all the gaps in her knowledge as well, made sure she was sort of liaising with us, the creative director and key content producers and things like that. But it just meant that the efficiency on the project was massive. Once we did the brand board and established this is the look and feel for your whole campaign, not just, you bought an immersive, you bought a social video, you bought another social video. We're able to like offer something quite custom for the client so they weren't getting something just off the shelf. And then just being able to watch that kind of sort of move into the various formats. And the creative ops manager would ensure that, our Adobe libraries and swatches are set up. So everyone in our team has the library shared with them. And they've got a safe limit of colors. So they know where to go. That saves time, even just having to go and color check everything, make sure the fonts are available for people in design ops know how troubling fonts can be and font access can be. And listen, it's a problem that we're still grappling with, but, liaising with IT to making sure, this group in our IT system have access to these fonts, things like that. Also, in that particular example, like I said, with social videos, we have to organize talent. And usually that's done by the producer, but when it comes down to the paperwork of like the hours worked and, gear hire and all that kind of stuff, and in collecting the invoices and making sure they're in one place, that role very much looks after that and kind of helps keep things clean, keeps the hygiene factor like really high around documentation and stuff like that. So it's just made things like really seamless. And like I said, the video producers can then really think about the video ideas, the designer and creative director can look at the overall aesthetic of the campaign, things like that, without getting too caught in the looking for documents and looking at various versions of things and everyone's working off a different page and all that kind of stuff. So
Amazing. Look, I know we don't love to play favorites, but is there a campaign or piece of content that your team have worked on recently that just makes your heart sing in terms of, creativity in motion?
yeah, I think we worked with a local insurer here. Their brief came to us. So part of their business is pet insurance. And they came to us and said, okay, because we'd worked with them with other business units of theirs. And then they briefed us in and said, can you come up with something really different? And now all the other publishers would go back with, articles and bits and pieces. And we included them in our response, but we said, let's think a bit differently. We had limited budget as well. So it wasn't like we could just come up with like some big giant campaign idea. And this was about the time where the ABS census went out. So it would have been 2001 last year. And I remember just reading a few news articles around the fact that respondents, pets weren't included in it. So there was no question around pet ownership and things like that. And like a little bit of outrage, but I was like, it's kind of interesting in newswork. So we took that and we went back to them with a response to do the, using our masthead, the Perth Now Pet Sense, sponsored by this brand. And they loved the idea. So what we did is we set up, we used shorthand. We obviously styled it. We set up using the shorthand to set up like a single page scroll. And then we used like Typeform and injected the code into it, which has a really sophisticated backend for collecting data. The great thing about this is we're able to run it as a competition to drive more entries. So the people of Perth, we promote it in a way that says, have your say about your pets. We missed out on the pet census. We're going to say sponsored by, this insurer who also likes your pets. And then at a certain point, they obviously had to opt in because it was a competition, but they were obviously able to create a database of people who have opted in. And then that information, with obviously their permission, was passed on to the insurer who could then remarket to them. So it was actually a really cool approach because they had some more value beyond the campaign. We were able to leverage something that's interesting and newsworthy, like the pet census. And we know people in Australia love their pets. And then off the back of that, we had results where we said we would create sort of a bunch of content around because we know what people are interested in. We know what the most popular dog in that suburb is, for example. We know what the most popular dog parks are. We know what the most favorite breed of cat is. So we created social content off the back of that said, you did the Perth Now pet census. Here's, Perth's top favorite pet parks. Here's the most friendly pet cafe in Perth. Here's the most popular breed in Perth. So it worked really, really well as an integrated campaign. And again, like just going way back and being able to do the breadboard process at the front and getting narrative down was so helpful in us being able to skin the whole campaign and then deliver all the assets based on that.
What a great idea, a pet census. Just having the opportunity for pet lovers to talk about their pets and basically have it work out for everyone on board. Like, it sounds like you had a great time whipping that one up for them as well.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun even just to work on the idea. And it was just really affirming to hear feedback from the agency and the brand as well, saying they really sort of loved the idea. And it was, like head and shoulders above the standard approach that they got. So it's moments like that where you're glad you just take a little bit of extra time, you have your creative space to go, how do we make this better without making it more complicated because the budget wasn't going to change? And again, like the role of sort of creatives in a team is to really look at that. And I guess I wouldn't be able to do that if I was, like up to my eyeballs in admin and signing timesheets and bits and pieces, all really relevant things, and reconciling credit card statements. So, that's where like this creative ops role was super valuable as well. So just being free to kind of like create an idea and then shape it and craft it and then winning the business on the back of it.
Nahum, what's your favorite piece of content on the web?
Well, I'm sure I could think of like a million different things, but I think the first one that comes to mind is, and I'm not even an avid player, but is Wordle because because it's so simple. Like it's not an app. Like you actually go into your browser and find the example from yesterday, Google Wordle. Like it's so simple and easy and engaging. I don't even share it anymore. Just do it for me. I share it with one person. So I think just the simplicity of that is just amazing. The other thing, a little bit more general, but I love sort of content creators on YouTube, specifically video essays. Like I just think they're the most interesting thing that has enabled so many people. Like there's so much knowledge out there, ideas, thoughts. I love looking at stuff on pop culture and films and looking at themes and bits and pieces, but it's history, there's everything. So just being able to see people empowered to create content of their own and you can see the numbers that these people, it's pretty amazing that it's just amazing that you don't need, and with all due respect to broadcast and big news media and big publishers, tools like YouTube and social media have given people a voice and ability to create that stuff, to share that. And you also see it in the numbers in how they're engaging with audiences and things like that. So I love a good video essay, whether it's on, breaking down of particular themes or symbolism in a movie. I saw Thor: Love and Thunder last night. That's probably what I'll be watching tonight.
So good.
Like YouTube essays on that. Yeah. Just like fans geeking out and stuff too. It's great.
Yeah. Is there a particular YouTube creator that you just always love watching?
Well, there's one, not really video essay, but there's a channel I follow called Epicurious. And some of the most interesting content that I follow of them is they'll take a recipe and it'd be, let's just say fish and chips done 3 ways. And then there's always a amateur chef. There's always a good home cook. And then there's like a 5-star Michelin chef type thing. And they kind of cut the video between the three of them. And usually the amateur chef is, there's a particular character. She's generally like a comedian and stuff like that. So, and then there's a fourth person who's like a food scientist so they cook their thing, they present their different takes on, for example, fish and chips, or it could be, carrot cake or whatever. And then it's interesting, you're just seeing their different approaches, different ingredients, their different reasons for doing things, like different hacks and tips. And then the food scientist goes through, which I love this stuff. She goes and breaks down why they're doing things differently, what doesn't work, what does work. They've used this particular product instead of this particular product, and then she'll break down the science and all that kind of stuff as well. So I love that channel. Epicurious.
Amazing. I'll be sure to link to the channel in the show notes for all of those listening. You can have a look at some of the cool videos that Nahum's chatting about here. And hopefully, we'd hope that everyone listening is across Wordle by now. But if they're not, I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well.
Yeah. And if anything else comes to mind, even if I haven't mentioned it, I'll send it your way as well.
Awesome. That would be so cool. Okay, Nahum. So I think we're actually coming up on our time, but I wanted to close with one last question, which is my absolute favorite question. I ask it in every interview and every opportunity I get. If you had a captive audience of 100,000 people and a microphone in your hand, what would you want those people to know about you, your work, or your approach to storytelling and creativity?
Yeah, I would say for me, my ethos is very much like creativity is the ability to connect seemingly unconnected. I actually think that's a quote from somewhere. In that, like, I love creativity and storytelling bits and pieces, but I think the power comes in seeing it as broader than pixels and paintbrushes. Being able to like look at things and creatively problem solve them makes you really agile, makes you really effective when you learn lots of different languages, tech, video, fine art, journalism, digital press marketing, social issues. I found that to be really energizing. And that's kind of what I want people to see for me, even the people around me, my bosses, my peers. I guess this is just the creative me not wanting to be boxed into a particular thing. Oh, that person makes videos and digital content. I love doing that, but it's about, how do we connect lots of ideas and narratives and stories together and find different answers that we didn't think were there. So yeah, creativity as the ability to connect the seemingly unconnected.
What a beautiful reflection. And from what I know of you so far and having had this chat, Nahum, I think that pretty well sums you up.
Oh, thank you.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you again for joining me on this episode of The Craft today, Nahum. It's been absolutely brilliant having you on and talking about some of those amazing successes and the rather humbling challenges that you've overcome but learnt so much from. It's just been awesome. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Wow, what an amazing episode of The Craft. There's so many insights there from Nahum, and I hope that you get lots of value out of the chat we had with him today. Now, before I go, I wanted to challenge you. In this episode, Nahum spoke about the success that he found in using brand boards to capture a creative approach to a story and how it would then be promoted on social media. So the challenge for this episode, should you choose to accept, is to create a brand board for your next content piece. As Nahum explained, it doesn't have to be a huge document. In fact, it's better to keep it simple and concise. So what should you include? Start with some broad style concepts like fonts, colors, imagery, how you want your story to feel, and then also some examples of what this would look like when the finished product is promoted on social media. And if you do decide to try out a brand board for your next content piece, please do keep us updated on social media. Tag us in your brand board and then show us the finished piece. I'd love to see it. We have lots of amazing guests lined up for future, so please do make sure you're subscribed. And if you'd like to come on and talk with me about content and storytelling on the web, please do get in touch. You can find all the details you need in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Craft. Until next time, happy storytelling.
Thank you for checking out this episode of The Craft. This show is brought to you by Shorthand, a platform that helps professional content creators produce beautiful stories without writing a single line of code. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow The Craft wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Or visit shorthand.com/podcast to get immediate access to all the latest episodes.